Welcome back to the Northstar Politics Show. I've rolled my big head back from Bavaria with a lot to talk about. Likely scared by the rise of Northstar politics, the BBC has been cutting corners. The scandal around a Dr. Trump clip has already seen heads roll. Northstar politics would never. Shocking reports around the rise in homelessness in the UK lay clear the impact of our current wealth inequality and housing crisis. We need less HMOs and more social housing. Can the government get that into their head? Positive news coming out of Kerala as the state becomes the first to eradicate extreme poverty in India. Look what happens when socialists put their heads together. Sean seems to think our comment section has been far too harmonious as of recent, so he lays out his belief that the downfall of the West will be caused by Christianity. His head's gone, but please, please, please let him land. That and lots more in store. Let's get into it. We're back.
No, I missed you, man. I missed you.
I missed you too, bro. I missed you guys at home as well.
It's funny. Do you know what's funny? It's because people don't realize we actually just text each other constantly anyways.
Bro, it's a running joke now where like we'll call each other an hour later. It's another phone call. It's like long time no speak.
What was the thing I messaged you this morning about my crazy idea one day when we're settling down?
This guy, lover boy. He said, bro, he messaged me out of the blue, bro. When we're older, like surely we're just living in the same neighborhood with all our friends and whatnot.
But surely.
No, it's true. I was even thinking about something similar this weekend because I grew up living with my nan living across the park from me. And not to get straight into the politics here, but obviously that housing crisis, inaffordability of housing, gentrification. A lot of my families had to move out of Hackney, Tower Hamlets area.
No, that makes sense.
But I was so fortunate to have people close to me when I was growing up.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I was very lucky as well because all of my friends, because obviously more of a suburban area, schools in a walking distance, local towns in a walking distance. It's kind of like that 15-minute city type stuff.
Yeah, but that's meant to be a little bit of a conspiracy theory. But
I know, yeah.
It's honestly on the surface level, I haven't dug into it, but sounds all right to me.
But let's not dive into the politics just yet.
Yep.
Where were you last week?
So I was away in Bavaria, in Munich, in München.
Okay.
At a conference called the One Young World Conference.
Wow, look at you. One Young World.
I mean, it's meant to be like the biggest like leadership conference for young people in the whole world. So people flying in from all over the globe, a crazy speaker lineup. And I was fortunate enough that my mentor brought me along, which was really cool.
And the purpose of it was what?
The purpose of it was, learn about leadership and whatnot. But as what Sean's kind of getting at is...
You see how this has turned into a diplomat? I'm trying to just tease it out of him.
No, because I was really fortunate to be there. So, and I met loads of cool people because I was with my mentor. So, and he's, very high up in these things. So we were backstage. I was meeting cool people. But before I went backstage and whatnot, my impression of it was a bit of a talking shop, which as anyone that knows me and has worked with me knows that I am like kind of... I have a phobia of talking shops.
Averse to it.
I'm very averse to it. So that was a bit uncomfortable. A lot of corporate language.
Yeah.
A lot of different companies that were sponsoring it, saying, this is why we need to just leverage AI because together we can, conviviality will come together and change the world with the youth of tomorrow and inspiring.
Sponsored by Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan.
It's that kind of thing. It's like we're going to, all the oil guys are there talking about how global warming's going to, they're going to help global warming.
Fair.
But it was a really cool experience. Also very cool to be in Munich.
Yeah.
You know I love to travel.
Yeah.
So I actually got to meet a friend of mine who I met in Panama earlier this year, hiking. And I thought, he lives in Munich. I live in London. I was thinking maybe when he comes to London, we'll link up again. But I wasn't counting on anything. But I found out I was going to Munich. Shouted him.
Okay.
We met up. We went to a nice traditional food parlour. Got some beer. Got some beef schnitzel.
Beer? Astaghfirullah.
Come on,
I've taught you better.
But come on, I don't play by those games. When in Rome. But it was really, really cool. And it was great to chat to him. And he taught me a little bit about the history of Munich and where Hitler had actually led a march there. And the one story I wanted to tell, which I asked him, because it kind of was just strange to think about. Because we often think about our friends coming from maybe the east of Africa or different parts of the world, maybe in like Bangladesh or Pakistan. Oh yeah, your grandfather would have done the mad thing.
Yeah, of course.
If you're from Tower Hamlets, and you're like Bengali, like your granddad done the mad thing.
Because obviously they have very deep, complex histories and
but they probably were involved in a civil war or partition war, or
exactly.
whatever it might have been. So they were barking it off. But so that's all. I said to my boy, I won't name him because of the nature of this story. I said, so like, what was your granddad on like back in the day?
All right.
And he's like, yeah, straight up, like everyone's granddad like fought for the Nazis.
Damn.
I said, fair, but it's like that's natural though.
That's what happens, yeah.
Because what we forget is the Nazis were the national government of Germany, so you were conscripted to fight for the national army. And even when there was social media, there's a lot of disinformation. You don't really know what you're up to. You just know you have to go fight, otherwise you're getting sent to jail.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's quite interesting to think about complicity and all these sorts of things as well, especially with, like, we mentioned it at, like, a couple episodes back on the podcast, things around banality of evil, etc., where, when you're placed in these situations, especially if you're just a citizen of the nation state, the propaganda, the forces that be, the politicians, etc., it's very easy to kind of just pull you into
Precisely.
Just
and as
working
over
for the
time, you
state.
can see how what can become of narratives surrounding certain people in society if we dehumanize them, if we start to just frame them as a rampant bunch of like working age men that are going to come and destroy the country. What can outgrow from that? Hint, hint, nudge, nudge, the narratives we have around asylum seekers and refugees right now. But I thought it was quite interesting to hear.
And look at us. We can't even have a normal conversation witithout just getting political straight away.
But we're going to actually have a little bit of a new section to the podcast today, later down the line, which is what we call Deeper Than Rap.
Nice.
For those of us who are fans of rap music and these sorts of things, what that basically means is it's a phrase that describes that feeling when someone says something and there's a surface value to it, but in reality, that's even deeper, my bro. It's deeper than that. And that'll be where we unpack things that might not seem inherently political, but are in fact political.
Yeah, exciting.
Tell me, how was it while I was away?
No, it was really great. Obviously, shout out to Harry, shout out to the champagne socialist himself.
Come on.
It was great to see a lot of his fans already actually watching the show and then thinking, wow, like I didn't really expect this. And that's actually the kind of mission that we're on. We really want to build a platform where like-minded people can come together and actually just join the show, push the movement forward. Because remember what our North Star is to push political imagination. And it was really just a blessing to have someone like that on the show, which also opens up my question to the people listening. Who do you want to see in the seat here? Who do you want to see actually co-host the show with us, or even, the big names that we can actually interview and really grill?
And we haven't co-host when me and Sean are both here, so a three-person team, which should be very exciting.
Yep.
One person I don't think will be co-hosting is Chunkz.
Oh my gosh, I can't believe I told him not to bring this up.
Because Sean took it upon himself to just cyberbully the boy Chunkz this weekend.
Oh my gosh.
Why go on for that?
No, look. So obviously I have my personal TikTok. I talk about Islam.
Shout out though. Where can they follow you?
Come on, people know my name, Sean Ramiz, on all social media platforms. And there was just a big debate over social media about whether or not you should disown your child if they leave the religion. And I think there was a lot of misinformation because I didn't see a good Islamic perspective on it. And so I just took it upon myself, a common sense approach, to be honest, to just say it quite literally is so self-defeating if your child wants to turn away from Islam in particular, and then you basically disown them. So obviously shout out Chunkz. We'd actually love to get you on the show at some point.
But I don't think it's going to happen. I don't think it's going to happen at this point. But yeah, speaking of cyberbullying, next week we're going to be doing some in-person bullying. Smoke's getting dished out. We have been invited by Discourse Collective, who are a group or organization who run like debates, to debate a couple of conservatives around migration.
Well, the thing that was pitched to us is that it would be the young conservatives, but lo and behold, there is no such thing as a young conservative, and therefore it's going to be an MP, and I guess someone who's fairly youngish but a bit older than us.
Yeah, who's like a conservative councillor or something.
Conservative councillor.
So me and Sean, there's a group called the Young Conservatives, who are the conservative wing of the who are the young wing of the Conservative Party, and we were told we were going up against them. I grew up debating, but I haven't debated in years. Sean grew up doing a lot of parliamentary speaking, but hasn't debated in years, similarly. So we're thinking, okay, cool, we're going to go up against a couple nerds who got bullied at school. It's fine, isn't it? Last Wednesday, when they sent who we're speaking against, Jack Rankin, MP, long, illustrious career, think tank leader, and then another think tank leader as well.
But what's a man like that to us, though?
Well,
what's a man like that to
so
us?
all chess now. When they announced it, within 2 minutes, phone call coming in from Sean.
My heart dropped. Sank to my stomach.
They're trying to rush us. They're trying to get us rushed in front of our people.
But I just felt like, damn, are we getting set up? We're just starting this Northstar thing, but yeah.
Yeah, they're trying to have us packed in by month 2. But then even we tried to say, okay, we'll get all our friends to buy tickets. Ticket link comes out. We see the ticket link maybe 20 minutes after it's come out. We send it around to all our family and friends. Immediately, people are messaging us saying it's sold out already.
Oh gosh, we can't even pack the audience. We can't even gerrymander
we can't even gerrymander what's going on. So wish us luck. We'll report back next week when hopefully we've turned these 2 conservatives into highlight reels, or not. If we don't, then you will not hear about it. And thank you for watching Northstar Politics.
If we don't do that, then what are we talking about? I can't even remember.
Exactly. It'll be a footnote in the story. Otherwise, it'll become the headline news of Northstar Politics next week. So look out for that. Well, excited for the show?
Very excited, but today we have a lot to unpack. So should we get into it?
Let's get into it. Okay, into the state of play. There's been a lot going on this week. Some stuff which is kind of really in the media headlines, but perhaps not that important, but we'll still talk about it. And some stuff which I think is really important from the global scene. The first thing, you probably all heard about this at home. Maybe you come to Northstar Politics for your news, but somewhere you probably shouldn't be going for your news is the BBC.
Oh, gosh.
That small little institution that we are soon going to overtake. We're almost on our way to 1,000 subscribers.
That's the delusion that you get at Northstar Politics.
Perfect. But as you probably have seen, there's been a lot of nonsense going on at the BBC. The BBC broadcast an episode of its programme Panorama, the investigative documentary show, that included a clip from Trump's 6th of January speech back in 2021. This is after Trump lost the election, but was sort of moving around to suggest that maybe the election had been stolen from him. The clip has been revealed as to have been edited so that two comments made nearly an hour apart were merged, creating the impression that Trump said, "We're going to walk down to the Capitol and I'll be there with you, and we fight like hell." But these were parts of phrases that were totally separate. This happened a while ago, but it's now being brought to light now. The two statements were separated in time and context, and the edit omitted parts of the speech which contextualized this, and where Trump called for a peaceful protest. This edit led to sharp criticism of the BBC, including accusations of misrepresenting Trump's words and thereby influencing perceptions of him and the events of January 6th. As a result of this scandal, Tim Davie, the Director General of the BBC, resigned. Deborah Turnus, head of BBC News, also resigned.
Wow.
And the BBC's chair, Samir Shah, has publicly apologised for what he described as an error in judgment for the editing. Now, this is where it gets spooky.
Go on then.
The President of the United States,
The man himself.
Donald J. Trump, 45 and 47, has threatened legal action against the BBC, claiming that they have defamed him by publicising this misleading version of his speech. He's looking for around $1 billion.
That's a lot of LCAFs. That's a lot of LCAFs.
Oh my gosh. Just make sure everyone at home, no dodgy fire sticks, pay your TV license. The controversy has sparked a wider debate around the BBC's editorial standards. Accusations of bias from the right about two-tier policing or whatever it might be, but then also from the left about the BBC's documentation of left-wing protests and also the Israel-Gaza conflict. Some are also saying it's an internal coup. Do you even watch the BBC, Sean?
Look, do I watch the BBC here and there? I like to just, take in whatever information I can when I come across it. It's not like I sit down looking forward to the BBC news programme or anything like that. Throwing it back at you, do you watch the BBC?
No.
And why is that?
Honestly, I just think... I barely watch legacy media anymore. And I think that they've lost their edge in terms of informational power and in terms of credibility.
Okay. I think I might actually take a slightly different opinion. And I think whilst that might be true, and I have a lot to criticize the BBC for, in particular, their coverage of Gaza, and the genocide, etc., I still think it's a very, very important institution.
No, I agree. It's very important. I just haven't found that important for me at this point in my life. And I'm struggling now to think who it actually is important for.
But the problem is, there is no such thing as true objectivity or true neutrality in this kind of political sense. And the BBC have always had a hard job of trying to seem moderate and try and, get both sides of views, etc. Their leadership is quite explicitly conservative. So Tim Davie, etc., who, like most of the top people kind of resigned, have links to the Conservative Party and conservative politics. So when it's come into this story around how people are kind of using this now to basically defame the BBC or basically say, legacy media, mainstream media, this is how it always is. I'm not surprised at all. Part of me just thinks I don't know. I don't have that same visceral reaction because I actually understand that the BBC, in a world of social media where things are getting even more polarized, has an impossible job. And yes, they will slip up from their standards, and maybe this is making me sound like a Rory Straught centrist or something like that.
Do you think they're always aiming for this neutrality? Does that even exist? I've always felt that's a bit of a loaded word, this idea of neutrality. Neutral to who? Because the BBC wouldn't call the genocide in Gaza a genocide. There was recently that BBC presenter who was sanctioned for changing it to pregnant women from pregnant people. And it seems like they're making quite loaded decisions under this guise of neoliberal order and neutrality. So
you're saying basically that the reason neutrality doesn't really exist is probably because it just attaches itself to the status quo, and the status quo is not neutral. Look, I'm actually very sort of sympathetic to that view. I just think it sits uneasy with me that people are vindicated by President Trump basically suing them for $1 billion.
But I think, honestly, and I remember you actually sent this to me.
Yeah.
The first thing I heard of this is you sent this to me, but you sort of framed it as if it was a bit of a storm in a teacup. When I watched the actual footage, I think it's pretty bad what they did.
But the essence of what Trump did was literally to call for those capital riots, right?
But if that was the essence of what he did, they should be able to find an undoctored clip.
But furthermore, the actual incidence of that edited part, right, is in an introduction to like a wider documentary where, from that perspective of being kind of like entertaining, I can see someone maybe made the decision to try do that. And that's why for me, I don't know. Did I feel like offended or outraged by it? Not really.
And I understand what you're saying, but I don't think it's the BBC's role to stylize what is effectively a coup on the United States Capitol. I don't think that's their role, and I think quite justifiably they've been reprimanded for this in the public sphere. I think what's also interesting about the role of the BBC is its wider understanding within a global context as a locus of soft power for the UK.
Okay.
A big part of, and we talk about this on the podcast, a big part of like norm setting and creating these structures by which people understand the world is credibility. And I want to introduce an idea for the viewers at home. Miranda Fricker, a brilliant philosopher, has this idea of epistemological injustice.
Injustice, yeah, great.
Precisely.
Yeah, nice.
So anything to do with epistemology is to do with gaining knowledge or being able to say that you know something. And this idea of epistemological injustice is the injustice created by questioning someone's capacity as a knowledge creator or a knowledge attainer. And what the BBC has done by positioning itself historically, if not still today, throughout the world as this bastion of knowledge creation flowing from the Empire of Britain is to subvert more localized knowledge creation schemes. I think what we're seeing here is an end to the BBC or a withdrawal of the BBC's power in doing that.
Can you like tangibly put out what you mean a bit, or like just kind of tease that out a bit more around this subversion of knowledge creation schemes?
So why is the BBC presenting what is definitely a neutral relative to the UK version of the world throughout the BBC World Service? Why is the BBC such a popular channel throughout the world and historically has been used as like a locus of knowledge for the global south, let's say?
Okay.
That's the point I'm trying to make.
Yeah. I think those critiques are completely valid, to be honest. It's always a talking shop or echo chamber on this show because we do really agree and align. But just to even push you a bit further then, but what's the alternative?
Well, I think what we're seeing is the alternative.
Which is?
There's people pushing towards the alternative.
Northstar politics?
Well, Northstar politics is not going to be the alternative. We're going to monopolize everything throughout the world. This is what we're looking to do. No,
Yeah.
we're not. We're not. And that's why we're bringing in voices like the Champagne Socialist. Okay, everyone? But no, what I think we're seeing is that people are moving towards a more diffuse and dispersed understanding of media and information and jettisoning this idea of neutrality, such that the BBC is rightly being punished for making any claim on neutrality. What people are realizing is that even statistics are not purely neutral.
Yeah. Okay.
I think it's important for people to understand this. It's been such a weapon of power throughout history.
Yeah.
Speaking of which, we're going to talk about some statistics.
Go on then. Bring us
Pretty
some
shocking
stats.
statistics. So here's our second story of the day. And this comes after a report last week that homelessness is dramatically on the rise in the UK. This is unsurprising. For anyone who's experienced like the housing crisis in the UK, maybe we have listeners abroad. Even in the US, a lot of our listeners are in the US. Same there for a lot of the big metropolises. So close to 300,000 people in England are reported to be experiencing severe homelessness. So this means not displacement from a residence, but sleeping on the streets or in unsuitable temporary accommodation. The figure represents a 21% increase since 2022. Around 70% of English councils have seen an increase in people approaching them for homelessness assistance in the last year alone. Local authorities spent $740 million in the past year on the most unsuitable forms of emergency accommodation. So like the most menial, not placing people in houses, but just helping people survive the night. The charity Crisis, which produced the report, says two major drivers are a lack of affordable housing and insufficient welfare support. Will allow the police to pass and get on with their work. So what we're seeing here is some of the problems we talk about week on week materializing in quite a drastic way. We speak about how to animate people's minds around these marginal changes we're seeing to housing regulation, marginal changes in gentrification, rents increasing, but every so often a report comes out that shows the quite discrete impact of this continuous slide into deprivation.
Unlike a political class's sort of cumulative decisions over time.
Precisely.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's many things more that upset me in the UK than our homelessness epidemic or our housing crisis. I think it's an incredibly... It's a blight on the image of the UK. It's a blight on our lifestyle that we're not able to provide housing for a population that is less than the housing supply we already have. You see people all the time as a talking point saying we need to build more homes. Clearly, that's not the point. There's more than enough houses for people. Clearly, it's a distribution problem. And I think as much as this is incredibly depressing, I think it just shows the natural outgrowth of all of the different trends we've been looking at.
I think as well that this obviously is an economic misallocation, right? And we speak about it a lot. This is fundamentally an economic problem, and there is enough wealth to go around to home people. We did it in COVID. Homeless people were literally shuttled into places which had spare capacity. But then part of it also that I think is missing from this conversation, especially when we see these headlines, is people's impetus or motivation to actually help. And I think that's the function of talking about, how a neoliberal society just engenders such an individualistic mindset amongst us all.
And also a financialized mindset.
Yeah.
Because one of the big things I say is we should not be financializing people's residences. And let's say you're looking for a mortgage and you're a mortgage provider and two projects come across your desk, and one project is offering the amount of money, but they will see the house as a liability. They'll be paying it off and they're not going to make any income from it. They can only pay a certain amount. If someone comes to you and says, I want to get a mortgage for a house, but it's going to be creating an income for me that I'll then use to pay off the house, one, that person who's using it for a yield will be able to offer more because they're not using it as their primary residence, but also they'll be able to have a more likely way of paying it off. They're not going to lose their job because the house itself is paying it off. So we can see the discrepancy here between the ideal goal of providing people with housing, but then the financialized way in which banks are incentivized to provide more capital to those that are going to further monopolize the landlord sector or the housing sector. Yeah. So the financialization of people's residences is insane.
Yeah.
And in the UK, we're proud of our NHS. I've said this on the podcast, but what's more important to someone's healthcare than an ability to have a sustainable and healthy house?
But then it's about changing the conversation to move away from that kind of financial matrix of thinking and that nexus where you're only calculating the worth or utility of an action from the direct transaction versus actually, so let's suppose we actually try to push this conversation in this country around housing is actually going to be a net benefit, for example, or social housing or free housing for homeless people will be a net benefit for the economy because of the second or third or fourth order effects of them actually being able to situate themselves in, getting a job, putting less strain on the NHS, etc. I mean, again, push political imagination. That's what we tried to do. But then in practice, it honestly feels so impossible. I'm
going to go even further and disagree with you. And we'll get into it later when we talk about Kerala. But I don't think we need to keep submitting to this economic rationale.
I'm not saying submit.
But I'm saying even to the fourth order, if we need to justify to the OBR or to the Bank of England that it's going to benefit the economy. How about people deserve to have a home as part of the social contract they've signed up to living in the UK?
I agree. And that's where state intervention comes in. But when your politicians are basically captured by corporate classes, then how do you break through that?
Well, first thing I'll say is I believe very much in redlining. We're going to talk about this in the budget next week when the budget's coming out in the end of the month.
Yeah.
But redlining your understanding of politics, making it clear whether it be through petitions or through your vocalised to your local MP, the red line upon which you stand. To your local MP, writing, saying, my red line is if you do not vote for X, I will not be voting for you in the election. That ship has sailed. Game theory is a subsection of economics which looks at how strategy games are played. And there's a famous one where, it's about making credible commitments. And two people are driving towards each other heading for a single lane bridge. And it's a game of chicken and who's going to leave first. Well, the person who's able to signal most credibly is the person who throws their wheel out the window. Yeah. So now they can't make a change. And you need to signal to your MPs credibly that if you make this decision, that is my red line, I will no longer vote for you. For me on the last election, it was wealth inequality in Gaza.
Yeah.
If you're not making the right sounds of that, then you've lost my vote. You can't. I'm not hearing the scaremongering of, but the Conservatives are going to get in. Okay, well, I'll let you know where my stance was. If you don't acquiesce to that, then how much of a public servant really are you?
But then this is what I mean. It even comes back to the kind of individualistic mindsets that a lot of people have. Particularly, there will be a lot of people who've just agreed with the sentiments and the essence of this conversation, but then again, because their own individual comfort is more important than the prospect of maybe some discomfort with another party coming through. So like the Conservative Party, for example, we saw this argument with not voting for Labour for reasons for Gaza. Then I just think that they're still going to put up resistance to a lot of this. Okay,
well then what I suggest them to do is, and I'll break it down a little bit more, I wrote an essay on my Substack, Noah East 9.
Oh, so they should read your Substack.
They definitely should. We're on our way to 200 subscribers and then
that's
past
big,
that,
200, I didn't know
million.
close.
200's first milestone, the next one's 1 million.
Mashallah.
But I wrote a piece called Immiseration Indicators. And some of the statistics we bring up is, pubs are closing down like week on week in the UK at a faster rate than HMO licensing companies are opening up. HMO licensing companies are entirely extractive. This is the kind of companies that will break down a house into 4 separate occupancies and then rent it out to basically extract your earned income from you as the landowner.
Without providing any extra value.
So I'm sort of portraying the country in a way that we are experiencing a recession even if economic activity is increasing. And if we take it back to our example of homelessness, to house someone in a government house or a government home, on the books, if we want to be crude, provides no economic activity.
Yep.
So the economic rationale, the GDP servants, the GDP slaves like Labour cannot rationalise this.
Yep.
But if we create a mortgage for a potential HMO licenser who then rents it out to 4 separate occupancies, then the bank gets the mortgage, the HMO licenser gets 4 streams of income, a whole lot of economic activity going on. So by that rationale, this is how we should move. Well, the remedy to that economic subserviency is politics, is democratic accountability, redlining your stances to your MPs, understanding the power of tenants' unions, and in the next election, prioritising things that are clearly having a devastating impact on our country.
Precisely. Well, I have nothing to add on that, but I'm sure the viewers will. So leave your comments below. How do you get that conversation going?
We're now going to contrast this with an example of a situation globally where there has been benefits to government intervention or government proactivity. And what I'm going to do to daisy chain these is bring in a book I read recently by an economist I love, Amartya Sen.
Big name.
Big name.
We love him.
Born in what was India, but in the actual land that is Bangladesh. We love him even more. We recorded Tower Hamlets, hold tight, all my Bengalis. So
shout out Tariq.
Exactly. Shout out our producer Tariq. So flowing from our previous discussion, we think about how can we rationalize the benefits of alleviating homelessness through maybe social housing provision, even if it's not economically, we can't put it on an account sheet. Well, in this book, Development as Freedom, Amartya Sen develops this idea that we need to reorient our understanding of development as improvements in people's freedom, in people's capabilities to enact a substantively beneficial lifestyle for themselves, to attain their well-being. So rather than looking at just purely has GDP risen, has GDP per capita risen, he looks at the increase in civic cooperation, ability to attain education, a healthy lifestyle, pollution indexes.
So like indexes or indicators for like mental health or
precisely
people's okay.
But even beyond like just mental health, which is kind of a passive indicator, but how free are you to enact your ideals for your life?
Sounds like a difficult thing to measure though, doesn't it?
It can be difficult to measure, but then there are some quite crude ways that we can do, like just your ability to attain education, your ability to attain healthcare, your ability to express your political voice, social security, etc. Behind the camera, Tariq just signaled us to talk about the Bhutan Happiness Index, which is quite cool, but let's take it closer to home. A South Asian, I want to say Bengali. If I'm mistaken and he's Pakistani, I'm so sorry. Mahbub al-Haq, who developed the idea of a Human Development Index, which you might have come across, HDI.
Yeah,
precisely. So this also feeds into Amartya Sen's work. And a reoccurring example in Sen's book, Development as Freedom, is Kerala, which is a state in southern India. He's always talking about how Kerala, even though it is dwarfed by larger economically states such as Mumbai, over and over again sees development outside of the economic sphere in helping its citizens attain education, in helping its citizens attain food and nourishment, in helping its citizens attain healthcare. And what we've seen as of November 1st, Kerala's chief minister of the Communist Party of India has declared that the state has become extreme poverty free, making it the first Indian state to achieve this milestone. The program behind this is the Extreme Poverty Eradication Project, announced in 2021. They held a door-to-door survey identifying about 64,000 households living in the most severe forms of deprivation. There's about 100,000 individuals. For each identified household, a micro-plan was drafted at that local ward level, detailing interventions in housing, land rights, healthcare, livelihood, and social protections that would enhance their capabilities, enhance their freedoms as Sen would understand it. Kerala's success in this fact rests on long-term socialist social welfare policies, land reforms, universal public distribution systems, uplift in literacy and health. This can be contrasted with the broader trends in India. Kerala has seen an increase in equality and becoming the first state to pull people out of extreme poverty. The broader picture in India is extreme rising inequality, persistent deprivation, and a concentration of wealth. I mean, this is one of the stories that made me happiest this year, especially as it came a few months after I read this book. Kerala's put in practice everything Sem was recommending.
And also, I think it's important to recognise that the population of Kerala is 30 million.
Yeah.
That's half of England. And when there's a lot of conversations around this kind of particular topic around, you know, I mean, they call themselves the Communist Party, but like social democratic policies or democratic socialist policies, whatever you want to call it, there's always a counter argument that it's a small population. It works on the small scale, not the large scale. 30 million sounds pretty large to me.
Massive.
I also think that one of the things that we can, or not necessarily learn from it, but an interesting distinction between the context of Kerala versus here, for example, is that many of these land reforms, for example, were put in long before or without there even being a chance for a corporate or financial class to actually get sort of like hold on many of the assets in the country. Whereas for us, I just kind of think back to the woes of the 1980s, where Thatcher's deindustrialization and opening up of financial markets is one of the biggest reasons we're in this mess now.
You can also think, look at what can happen on the other end of upsetting the wealthy elite.
Yeah.
There was a lot of protest from the wealthy elite about the land reform that would make them feel worse off. And, you know, there's quotes you can think about where if you're empowered or if you're the people empowered, then inequality will feel like punishment. But as Thomas Sankara said, sometimes the situation we deal with is weighing up, and I'm going to paraphrase here, champagne for some or drinking water for all. And what Kerala has been able to do is by redistributing some wealth and some leverage and power from the most wealthy in society, pull the whole of their population out of extreme poverty, the first to do so.
Do you think there's like a culture variable here though as well?
I mean, it very much is cultural.
Yeah.
Because it's not because they have the most money.
Yeah.
They're dwarfed by like Mumbai and other states around India in terms of money. And this is exactly what Sen tries to get across, is that development should not always be measured in financial terms, because clearly that is not the starting point. That is perhaps a means at a certain point, but it's not an end in itself. There are far more facets to development that should be deemed both ends in themselves, but also routes towards even financial empowerment.
Well, let's hope we can actually see some sort of movement on that then for our own country.
You know, when there's an example where you can say, this is what you can point to when you talk about how can I justify my political imagination being pushed. This is happening.
Yeah.
This can happen. People can reorient their thinking, even within a locus, within a country that is much more broadly much more broadly capitalist and has a lot of inequality going on. You can still put in place schemes and community building on a state level, on a county level, on a borough level to improve people's circumstances.
Well, that's one of the big things. It's quite it's quite localized. There's a lot of devolution and like a lot of decision making happens at the local level. And again, I don't want to keep harking back on that particular point around culture or thinking, but I do imagine as well, and this is just an assumption because obviously I'm not an expert on Kerala, but their levels of consumption perhaps and their attitudes and what's like socially accepted is quite conducive to that economic success. But in a way, can that really be replicated?
Well, it brings us back to our first story. What is neutral?
Yeah.
The status quo is relative to the country within which it is, and being able to modify the status quo through discourse, through changing the norms, is a way that we can actually change the material state of the world.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
that's a very heartening story.
Great story.
Great story. So into the back roads, where we give a little précis of some stories that you might not have seen on Front Street. The first one I want to talk about is the Syrian president, Ahmed al-Sharaa, or you might know him better as Abu Mohammed al-Jilani.
His street name.
Street name, but it's also his nom de guerre, which is like his war name. But you might recognize him as the former jihadist leader who then consolidated his leadership of Syria to become the current interim president. Well, he actually visited the White House to meet with Donald Trump. Can you imagine?
Oh my gosh.
He used to be like facing down the US drones, and now he's sat in the White House with Donald Trump.
There's something quite interesting about Trump and his response to, or the respect that he gives to a lot of world leaders.
Loves a strongman leader.
He loves a macho man.
He loves it.
He loves it. But then also, it's just so funny because all of his cultish supporters who go on and on and on about Islamic extremism. Well, hang on, the calls come from inside the house.
Precisely.
Who's he meeting?
But it's interesting because like this marks a significant shift in the US-Syria relations. A Syrian leader meeting a US president in Washington after years of isolation and sanctions on Syria. The meeting discussed Syria's role post-civil war, potential reconstruction, and the lifting or easing of US sanctions, and also just Syria's role in international diplomacy. I don't trust the US. But it's very interesting to see. And not to hark on about a repeated motif we have, but when we talk about norm setting, 5 years ago, you were on the battlefield as a jihadist and imprisoned by America from 5 years, 2006 to 2011. Fast forward, you're sat in the White House.
Look, it is very complex, right? Because obviously, on the one hand, we don't trust Trump. We don't trust U.S. involvement in many foreign countries. They obviously have their own geopolitical gain from all of this. And also, on the flip side, the entities that al-Jilani was part of, there are reports that there have been a lot of war crimes committed against populations, whether that's maybe the Jews or the Christian communities. I don't know. I have to people.
You know what I think is important on that point is same for Donald Trump. Same for the organization he represents. And there's we sometimes buy into this Western narrative of, on the one side, they're meeting with our hallowed leaders of our great country. But it's no, you man are just, you're as bad as each other. Yeah. So it's as much as you're a legitimate leader, he is too. Yeah, no, for sure.
But I do think as well, when people are navigating the complexities of these stories, always look at who are the kind of refugees or the very vulnerable and innocent people supporting, and are they going to be better off? I think they will be. I don't mind going out on a leg to say that.
I mean, I'm placing no bets. I'm just going to wait and see.
No, obviously we can wait and see, but at least what Syrians went through for the last however many years has been horrible, and it's good to see an end to that to some extent. So.
Precisely. Second story, another quite positive story. So a month into the ceasefire in Gaza, families have begun to slowly move back to their former homes in the Gaza Strip.
Can I stop that? Yeah, though. Homes.
I mean, people at home would have seen the photos of what the Gaza Strip looks like now, but it is their home.
Yeah,
very much rightfully their home.
Spiritually.
Although their house might not be intact, their home is still in Gaza.
For sure.
And where they've been given access, UNRWA has said that there's been a lot of families moving home, but they are having limited access. UN agencies are still being limited in their access to support that repatriation.
And aid as well, I'm sure, is just still being blocked.
It is very much a tenuous ceasefire, which, like we said, we'll keep you updated on, but that is a positive sign.
That's good.
The third story I want to go on to, which is one that I doubt anyone at home would have heard of. If you think you've heard of it at home, 3, 2, 1, say what I'm going to say. No, Tanzania. So, shocking story coming out of Tanzania. We're looking at an Amnesty International report right now if you want to read up more. But there's been unlawful killings and other human rights violations in Tanzania amid an enforced internet and electricity blackout. So it's absolutely bonkers stuff, which you just haven't seen much talk about. So following an October 29 general election, the incumbent party has enforced a man-made internet blackout and electricity blackout in certain parts of Tanzania. Amnesty International, in that quote here, is particularly alarmed by reports that amidst the blackouts, security forces have used excessive force to suppress and disperse ongoing post-election protests, resulting in the deaths and injuries of protesters. I think there's a couple of things here. One, just can you imagine? I mean, you're a brain rot boss. Can you imagine just internet blackouts? One, electricity blackouts, not being able to sanitize water, sanitize your hands, keep the house warm, etc., etc. But then amidst that, it being enforced by your government to pursue essentially sort of pogroms and opponent killing.
I mean, look, you're saying views at home, haven't heard of it, or haven't really, come across the story. I'm a bit ashamed of myself because I'm some big political thinker. And
there's nothing to be ashamed about, because what I think this shows for people is that something so atrocious can be going on and it not hit any political news channels, even for someone like yourself who's quite politically engaged. Yeah. And this means it's there's really an emphasis on us as political agents who want to understand the world to diversify our news channels, to diversify our source of information and put that effort in on our end.
But that's also... Sorry, go ahead.
I was going to say, don't go to the BBC.
But that's why I also think no matter how many people say, oh, posting to your Instagram story is performative, or doing a little repost, etc. Sure, maybe some cases it can be, but if you are doing the bare minimum, that is better than doing nothing.
But also, if you're going to post an Instagram story, find an interesting one that people wouldn't have heard of before. If I'm tapping through 5 Instagram stories all the same, why don't you be that one that references the Tanzania crisis?
Oh, okay. For a sec, I thought you meant interesting organization actually talking about Tanzania as opposed to Tanzania itself.
Oh, no, I mean, you know what I mean? Bring up the story that you haven't seen people talking about, which takes a bit of effort. Because if you're just totally passive in your consumption, then you're going to be given exactly what people want you to hear.
Well, then, again, the onus is on, I guess, people like us to bring it to people. So,
but honestly, a shocking story, and we'll keep an eye on Tanzania.
Welcome to a new segment, Deeper Than Rap. Now,
looking forward to it.
You've heard that phrase, obviously, in the streets. Because
you're in the streets?
Back in the day.
The avenues.
Back in my day, the suburbs. No, and we want to basically break down some stories where you might not think it's political, but there is some political thinking behind it. So, Noah, fan of Michael Jackson?
I am a fan of Michael Jackson.
Well, are you going to be attending his autobiography film coming out next year?
Perhaps. The last film I went to see was the live action version of How to Train Your Dragon. And if it can live up to that, then maybe.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned that, because I want to kind of dive into the financialization and the politics of it. So people at home might be thinking, I'm going to be talking about Michael Jackson as a person, his legacy, and him being a controversial character, which is an interesting conversation, but that's been there and done. However, the thing I'm interested in is the fact that this Michael Jackson film is following a trend of highly produced blockbuster films that are really just about things that happened in the past. So whether that be Oppenheimer, whether that be, what's that recent one about Freddie Mercury that came out, and Michael Jackson now. And this is following a trend of basically just rehashing, the creative arts are rehashing traditional stories that we already know about. So whether that's the new TV series around Harry Potter, or whether that's the live action version of How to Train Your Dragon.
It wasn't great.
But my point is financialization is basically affecting the arts, because a lot of these big producing companies, etc., they just want to make a quick buck. They don't really care about, putting money behind stories that need to be told anymore. They want to be putting money behind the stories where they know they can make a return on their investment.
And can I even weigh it up a little bit differently?
Mm-hmm.
It's definitely returns important, but anyone who's worked in finance will understand it's return and risk. So they weigh that up and develop a little what's called a Sharpe ratio if you want to look up at home. But a lot of what these companies are doing is thinking to themselves, okay, perhaps we could get a greater return if we speculate on this up and coming great producer with this novel idea. But in fact, when weighed against the risk, where we could get a pretty decent return of just rehashing this, turning How to Train Your Dragon into live action and turning a cartoon into real life, we're only going to end one way.
And that's why it's actually so sad for the arts in general, because the arts is literally all about taking risk. It's all about literally putting a story out there, not necessarily just for, the views or the viewership that it might engender, but actually taking a risk on a narrative that can make a real impact on people's lives. Yeah,
and also doing things which aren't immediately sort of optimizing in their logic.
Yeah.
Doing things that are slightly abstract and outside of the worldly rationale.
Yeah.
So it's quite crazy to see, but I'm glad you unpacked that, because that's something that people will be very excited about, but it's something more to think about there. So Sean, we've had 6 good episodes, or 5.5. We're halfway through the 6th episode, and you've decided to bring it to an end here and ignite a culture war.
We might as well just cancel ourselves right now, to be honest.
So what side are you on in the crusade is what I'm trying to get my head around.
Oh my gosh, don't frame it like this.
All right, you got something to land.
All right. The downfall of the West is going to be rooted in the politicization of Christianity. Well, listen, right? The reason I want that to be so sort of like headline grabbing is because so often we are accustomed to this narrative that the downfall of the West will be Islamic extremism, or not even Islamic extremism, this rise of Islamism, okay? But in my eyes, I actually think the politicization, so not Christianity itself, the thing that's being born out of Christianity right now, or the fight over the meaning of Christianity, is really what's going to be a bit more defining for the West. So what do I mean by that? What do I actually mean by downfall first? Well, look, love it or hate it, the West, secularism, liberalism, we've built a sort of multicultural society based on principles of tolerance. Does it always stand up in practice? Maybe not. But fundamentally, at a theoretical level, we've all tried to basically build a cohesive society of coexistence, respecting each other's communities. Cool. That's what this kind of poster image of the West is. Now, over the last 20 years, there has been huge crackdowns on Islamic extremism and religious extremism from the community. And I'm not even here to say that's necessarily a bad thing. Like, fair enough, good. Crack down on extremism. That's what we want to do. But what we're seeing now, though, on the other hand, is a form of a different type of extremism that no one's really calling it for what it actually is. And I don't necessarily have the terminology to capture it properly, but it's this militant political Christianity, which, in my eyes, is devoid of the principles that Christ actually even came to teach in the first place. And who are the kind of main propagators of this? Well, in America, it might be your evangelical Christians who are supporting a genocidal regime, who are actually eliminating the original Christians off the map in Palestine. Or in this country, the likes of Tommy Robinson and his goons. Tommy Robinson recently converted to Christianity. But if you actually have a conversation with him, well, hang on,
Is he built in the image of Christ?
That's what I'm saying, right? And I think the reason this is so absurd is because this conversation is very important to have, but for the last 20 years, you're having Muslims having to, really justify their existence based on the premise that a lot of these religious extremists exist. And moderate Muslims are having to come forward and be like, oh, okay, this is bad, this is not good, etc., right? But within Christianity itself, where are the dissenting Christian voices around this?
I mean, I get what you're saying. I disagree, though.
Okay, that's fine.
I think it seems like what we're getting at here is maybe a bit defensiveness about how Islam has been tarred so much by their extreme faction, and you're looking to point towards the extremists among Christianity. But could it not be more useful in terms of trying to prevent the downfall of Western society and saying we need to address extremism? Because isn't the running thread here that there's extremists of all different creed and cloth, be they Islamic extremists, be they financial extremists, be they free market extremists, be they communist extremists, be they whoever, that leverage whatever school of thought or creed it might be to propose their extreme ideas.
So I completely agree with that, right? I actually very much agree with that, and I'm glad you said that. But the thing is, are we willing to call things for what they are? I don't think so, because whether it's financial extremists, we call that out all the time. If it's Islamic extremists, we call that out all the time. But
would you feel comfortable saying that this is what it is? Because in the same way that I feel like I could hear you defending, or not defending, but defending Islam against it being co-opted under the banner of Islamism or Islamic extremism by saying, well, these people are not acting Islamically. Is it then not unfair to say that Christians should be sort of paralleled among, or sort of brought out within that framework of extremists in Christianity?
Unpack that a bit more.
So what I mean is, like, you've obviously suffered at the hands of people framing Muslims as extremists because of extreme Islamism. Yeah. Are you not now just reacting and doing the same to Christians?
Well, I think what it's more about is saying that there is genuinely a new movement happening on the, I don't know, the far right, etc.
Could I ask you to characterize it a little bit? What does this movement look for? What are they doing?
So this movement, right, is talking about a resurgence of English identity. Okay, that's the key thing. They want to make England English again, right? And for them, they're clinging on to this historical notion of Christianity as the sort of anchoring identity marker for what England actually is. And this is very much into a response to secularism and the decline of Christianity overall, which then they point to the fact that it's because we've let too much of the other in, whether that's Muslims.
How does that hold for the States, though?
What do you mean for the States?
The States, because you referenced the States largely in your opening talk about this. The States aren't advocating for an English way of life.
Well, for the US States, sorry. So I think this attitude, right, is being actually imported from the US. So this evangelical attitude of this very individualistic, devoid of, like I said, Christ-like principles Christianity, that's kind of infesting a lot of the discourse around all these other strands.
But are they not open to interpret the Bible as they see?
I mean, they are, but then that's at the point at which other voices from that community say, actually, hang on, like, this is not how it should be done, not in this name. Okay,
but then also, is it not just like the problems you have are you're dealing with sort of how they present themselves rather than what they really are? In the same way that you might say people villainize Muslims because of how extremists present themselves as Islamic, but they're not in fact really that way. And this ends up harming a lot of Muslim people. Are you not doing the same thing in taking these examples of extreme Christians and saying there's a problem within outflowing Christianity? Even in your opening talk about it, you said it's born out of Christianity. That makes it seem as if there's something within Christianity that allows this, which often what Muslims get criticized for is why there's so many Islamic terrorists. Well, even if you say they're not Muslim, what is it about Islam that allows for so many terrorists to find their ideology at home there?
Well, the rise of Islamic terrorism is well documented, and actually that we can actually have a dissenting conversation at some later point around how that actually came to be. But because I think we're actually at the very early stages of this resurgence, this reactionary movement of this Christian militant political movement, there needs to be some discourse around actually reclaiming the meaning of that. So it's not the case that I'm saying, these like this these Christians need to sort themselves out or anything like that. It's not what I'm saying at all. I'm just saying the thing that's very pervasive is that there's a movement coming up that I don't think has any Christ-like principles about it. It's actually an aberration of real Christianity. Much of the communities that we know, whether that's the East African Christians, the West African Christians,
I get that point. Yeah. But what I worry is that because you haven't disentangled the actual fundamental factors of this that you have problems with and attacked it for those purposes, but you've actually labelled it under extreme Christianity, it's going to cause the same problems that we've had with extreme Islamism. Instead of saying I'm against hyper-individualism, I'm against ethno-nationalism, etc., allowing it to be framed under extremist Christianity, which is what these extremist Christians are doing, gives some level of cover, but also frames normal Christians within that bracket.
So perhaps then I should say that actually it's a sort of an element of like a white supremacist movement, as opposed to basically calling it a extreme Christian movement.
Exactly, I agree. Okay. And it's like the same thing that's going on where it's I don't know, sort of terrorist fanatics are leveraging Islam wrongly, but we call them terrorist fanatics.
Yeah.
Ethno-nationalist supremacists are leveraging Christianity wrongly, rather than allowing for that phrasing of extreme Christianity.
Okay, so I'm saying, so is this more like the semantic phrase of actually an extreme Christianity is not helpful?
But I think it's beyond semantics. I don't think they are extremist Christians. And I think it is...
So why do you not think they are? Because if they're levying the word of Christ...
I disagree initially on, I don't think it's born out of Christianity.
Okay.
Do you know what I'm saying? Because I have the level of respect for Christianity in the same way for Islam, where it's like, I don't think this level of like sort of deprived behavior and fanaticism could be born out of Christianity in its entirety. So it's from outside.
I don't think it's born out of true Christianity, but I definitely think it's definitely imported and a movement that has a lot of similarities to evangelical forms of Christianity that came from America. And a lot of the key kind of fundamental principles around individualism being at its core, and othering of other communities, very capitalist principles as well. I think there's a lot of similarities there.
But I also don't think it'll be the downfall of the West. I don't think it'll be the downfall of the West.
I think there'll be... I said that to be hyperbolic, just to get the little click. So if you made it this far, then well done, because you actually let me land. But yeah, audience, what do you think? Have I just become radicalized? Am I just hating Christians too much?
No, I think it is interesting because
it's important though.
It is important because I'm noticing it. But there is that cultural weirdness. I was raised Catholic. Yeah. My literal mum's church is. I'm not gonna say wherever.
Yeah, wherever.
But I was raised Catholic. Yeah, and it's weird me growing up and seeing like Christianity be leveraged in this way, this really militant way, because it always just seemed like a bit of a chill thing.
And that's what I mean. I'm just trying to open up the conversation to have it in the first place, because I think it's a very new phenomenon.
Yeah.
So who knows?
Let us know your thoughts down in the comments.
For sure.
So we're into the echo chamber, my echo chamber, and probably will be a running theme it's actually about a year since I started writing. And what will probably be a running theme is that I'll talk about some essays I've written.
It's just a way for him to shout out Substack.
But honestly, follow me on Substack. But it's more just like, these are thought capsules that I've developed, so it's good to bring up.
No, it's good. It is very good.
So before I even started publishing my work, I went to Cuba last year in December, and I went on a trip with some Afro-Cubans to a place called Guanacaboa, and I went to the house of a practitioner of Santeria. They're all practitioners, but of a Babaloa, who's sort of the priest within Santeria. And what Santeria is, for those that don't know, it's a religion practiced throughout the Caribbean, largely in Cuba and in some other Hispanic countries, that flows all the way back to West Africa. So in Nigeria to this day, there will be the Nigerian mysticism of Orisha, where there are these deities within like a larger pantheon who represent certain things in their life. And it's a very well understood cultural religion within Nigeria. When slaves were transported over to the Caribbean, they tried to maintain this religion. And I'll take Cuba as an example of worshipping their Orisha or developing their connection through God through these Orisha. But the Spanish enforced Catholicism on them. So if they came into the house and saw any figures of their ancestors, they would smash them. Or if they heard them referring to their ancestors, they would beat them or, kill them. So what these slaves did is they said, okay, cool. We're not allowed to have our certain figures in our house. We will then take this mug and this will become Obatala. And when I go to the church, you tell me to praise Saint Barbara. Perhaps for me, I will impose in my mind the image of Ogun or one of the other Orisha. And what I found in my journeys out there is, especially those of us who were born within sort of religion and black religions, we have this horrific understanding of what is going on with these, let's call them non-conventional religions, especially in the Caribbean. And we project onto them this idea of a horror devil cult of Satan worshippers. And when I went there, I was sort of wanting to be terrified by the experience I had. But what I found is these are people who are just trying to express their sincere relationship with God or with their God in the best way they can. And we, especially as members of the diaspora, should not look upon these people as the first to be put down, but as people that, although they are misguided, are sincere. And I also leverage some ideas about proximity to whiteness, because we exist in a society where, like, closer to whiteness, you have closer access to resources, power, and safety. And therefore, sometimes what we find is people are incentivized to be the most fervent critiques of these non-traditional religions because they represent the total absence of whiteness, or actually a violent rejection of whiteness. I think it's interesting sometimes to think about, even though, you're of a, we'd say, conventional Abrahamic religion, I'm monotheistic, but it is interesting sometimes to think about how we discuss and interact with those people who society has told us are these horrific examples of degeneracy or deviancy. But when we interact with them in reality, we realize, oh no, you've been misunderstood.
Yeah, I think, like, it's quite interesting when you unpack because we're both West Indian, obviously, and we've grown up like looking at Obeah and Caribbean folklore, and there definitely is that distinction between these kind of traditional West Indian practices, or maybe West African practices, because a lot of the West Indian tradition was inherited from there, around it just being very backwards. And so, no, I really appreciate you bringing that up. It actually reminds me of a comment that was left on one of our last videos when we actually brought up this idea of perennialism in 2 episodes ago. And one of the critiques for that kind of specific perennial point was that the perennial school of thought actually excludes a lot of these traditional religions from being part of their kind of calculus, because it doesn't seem as if it's like as legitimate as all the other main ones. But then it comes back to norm setting, who sets what's legitimate.
It's also interesting to think that we are being somewhat hypocritical even within West Indian communities, because I don't know, do you have 9 nights in
that's more of a Jamaican thing, I think.
Like, well, not Jamaican
or
though,
like,
we have
Afro-Caribbean
thing, exactly.
thing, yeah.
So for those at home that might not know, a 9 night is after someone's died. For the 9 nights afterwards, you'll go to the house of the deceased and basically have like drinks and music and prayers and these sorts of things. But then obviously my family would all consider themselves like Christians, but then the understanding there is we're doing that to basically let the duppy out, let the duppy rest sort of thing, which is like the ghosts. So it's like you're able to have that sort of double think of, I'm a Christian, conformist, traditional person, but then there's also part of our culture. And maybe that more than anything should let us know, like, we should be far less judgmental of these people.
Yeah, I think also, like, look, at the end of the day, there will definitely be overlaps in the, not necessarily the practices, but the moral truths those practices are meant to evoke between a lot of this, whether it's traditional or whether it's like Abrahamic or whether it's this or that. And I think that's really what the main thing we should focus on is that, is this like practice actually making this person a better person?
Precisely.
And is it actually bringing good into the world? Because, I mean, in my worldview anyways, even though, I'm part of like a traditional Abrahamic faith, goodness has one divine source. And so if it's, coming and creating good in the world, then I don't see why we should berate it.
Precisely. So that's something I've been reflecting on recently for my little echo chamber this week.
That was real nice.
Episode 6, bro.
It's actually going so fast. I can't even keep up.
But we really do this now. We're really just men with mics.
I know. It's really amazing to like come out of nowhere, just have an idea, hoping it will land and like resonate with people. And already it's grown so much.
Bro, the response has been crazy.
Yeah,
it's literally my first time in front of camera. So you've got a taste of this, but it's, bro, seeing something come out of our minds that we want to put into action, seeing the response has been so heartening. And it sounds so cheesy, but now I understand why people say this. Anyone at home that actually wants to get involved with certain things, or just try it.
No, definitely.
Just try it.
And also, like, it's just important to sort of like center our intentions. Like, we actually just want to have conversations that hopefully inspire people to do the same as well.
And even as much as like we try and make it all glossy and good thumbnails designed by Sean and all that kind of stuff, we want to maintain that humility of, we are just trying to push political imagination.
Yeah, and also like something that you always say to me in private is like, it's actually fun to like quote unquote fail in public.
Yeah,
as well.
But it's because I've had to learn to develop that muscle.
Yeah.
Maybe there's a little bit of my own personal insight, but cool. I was a great student. I had a lot of success throughout from my life, and that developed like this sort of resentment of risk or rejection of risk, because you keep getting emboldened by these successes that you start risking less because you're so threatened by that.
And even me, like I've had to learn the phrase of like, don't let perfect be the enemy of the good.
Yeah,
like let's just actually try do something. It might not be perfect, like bro, even today landing that point around Christianity, like it's not always perfect because you're doing this for the first time, and that's only just going to both improve us, but also listening to your guys' feedback as well is going to help prove the experience overall. So,
exactly. And the one thing, and you remember December last year when I was back from the Bahamas for a couple of weeks, a revelation I had about God loves a trier, just trying a ting. Anyone that bumped into me around that time, I probably seemed like a mad guy shouting on street corner, just try a ting.
Definitely.
Because at the end of the day, as much as you might be worrying about, you try something and people are going to mock you or whatever it might be, your response is just, I'm just trying my best. I'm just trying a ting. And what could people say to that?
And also, like, do you ever lose anything if you, like, you know, try something and rather than, you know, just living in regret?
Precisely.
Like, what is there to actually lose?
Precisely.
Yeah.
So fail in public, people, try a ting. This year was the year of the trier. Next year, it's the year of the trier.
Speaking of people who are trying a ting, obviously your party conference is coming up.
Yeah, your party conference is coming up end of the month.
Yeah, that's something I'm looking forward to if we go.
No, I'm looking forward to it. Maybe we'll head up to Liverpool. I'm not too sure. But honestly, even this week I've been reflecting on Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah.
Long career, you know. And as much as he's been in the headlines recently, Jeremy Corbyn, he needs at least be plaques outside his yard already.
I think, like, in many people's minds, even if they don't, or if they're not particularly involved in politics, he literally represents a movement, hope, imagination, inspiration, and we need to give him credit for that, even though, you know, maybe they failed in public a few times themselves.
But we say that it's fine. They failed in public, but they're trying to restore a new understanding of politics where it's not a zero-sum game and it's not a one-time interaction where you can try again.
Yeah.
Because of the idea of a deliberative democracy. So I think definitely Jeremy Corbyn is someone who we all look up to. And, you know, you hear the current government talk about returning politics to an action of service. Who's been more of a public servant in Parliament over the past 20, 30 years than Jeremy Corbyn?
Yeah, principled as well.
Really impressive. We had a little bit of drama about your party, though.
Yeah, speaking of failing in public, gosh, that actually wasn't even planned. I need to correct something I said in the earlier episodes. Thanks for my friend here not actually correcting me.
I barely listen when you speak, bro.
But I basically misspoke and said that I did the social media for Andrew Feinstein's campaign, but actually it was just the TikTok. I was there on the launch day and the end day, and that was in no way meant to kind of discredit or take credit from the actual kind of volunteers who did most of the brunt work.
No, of course not.
Obviously, I had my experiences. I said my experiences, but I'm glad they actually had great experiences themselves.
Literally, so shout out to Sana Iqbal?
Sana Iqbal, and then also
Gabby Samara.
I don't
want to butcher that pronunciation, but hold tight, you guys.
And they've got Mamdani-esque design. It's quite cool.
So literally, as we say, came to push political imagination. If we get something wrong, that's fine.
It's fine. It happens.
We'll come correct it and all that kind of jazz. Looking forward to the next week.
I am, very much so. And thank you all for tuning in again, once again. We really appreciate you. It just wouldn't be the same experience without actually people interacting with us online.
Guys, we need it. Like, subscribe, comment. Get your mum to subscribe, get your dad to subscribe, get your friends and family to subscribe because we're trying to hit 1,000 subscribers on YouTube.
We're going to go mad. We're going to go mad.
We're going to get diamond chains. It's going to be like
we're both shaving our heads. We're both shaving our heads.
Anyway. And also subscribe on the podcast channel. So not just YouTube, also Spotify and Apple.
Please.
We'll leave it there for today and we'll see you next week.